everyone, in today's video we're going to continue taking a look at list building, and I'm just going to try and apply all the concepts that I talked about in part 1 towards an actual list. The list itself is nothing competitive. I'm really just going through the motions and providing an example of how the list building process might look. For this example, we're going to go the route of Titans to Legions. And let's say that I absolutely love Warhound Titans. No matter what I end up building, I want Warhounds to be the focus and main part of the list. From there, I'll go through all the supplements I own or have available and try and look at mana pools that emphasize a Warhound and use that as my base. When building a list for match play, your list has to contain at least one mana pool that you build everything around. After flipping through all the supplements, I've decided I'm going to go with a Lupercal light mana pool because, one, it emphasizes the Warhounds that I want to be the linchpin of the list, and two, this mana pool itself actually fits in really well for a skirmish style game, and it can easily build up to a confrontation style game, especially when you look at adding in auxiliary titans, and it should work as a pretty good foundation moving forward. We now have our foundation in the Lupercal light mana pool, but the question is, what does this actually do for us? In the case of the Lupercal mana pool, it gives us a trait called Hunting Packs, which lets you pick and choose your squadrons every turn of the game. A fantastic bonus for Warhounds, because what normally happens is your squadrons have to be picked before deployment, and they remain fixed the whole game. This gives you the overall flexibility of tweaking those squadrons every turn to a pretty good benefit. On top of that, it also gives you a +2 to your coordinated strikes instead of a +1. Making the Warhound weapons even stronger to an unshielded target. Like all mana pools in any supplement, they contain a mandatory component, which is like the minimum amount that you have to take, and an optional component, which would allow you to get up to a maximum. Your mandatory component would give you what's called a demi mana pool, or half strength, and then once you add the optional components, it now becomes a full strength mana pool or battle line mana pool of 5 titans. So where I would go from here is I would look at the mana pool traits and ask myself, what's the main benefit or takeaway from this in terms of picking a legion that would kind of augment this and make it even better? In the case of the Lupercal light mana pool, it's pretty clear to me that this is really based on a play of squadrons. So when I'm selecting a legion, I should look at the legions and see which ones would benefit squadron play the best, or Warhounds the best, and go from there. After flipping through the supplements and all of the legions, the Legio I've decided to go with is Legio Solaria, because mainly their legion trait, Wolf Packs. What this does is it lets you build squadrons of up to 4 Warhounds instead of the usual restriction of 3 Warhounds. This would go hand in hand with my, believe it's called, Hunting Pack trait that comes with the Lupercal mana pool. So now I get to build larger squadrons and mix and match them every turn. There's some really good synergy happening between my mana pool and the Legio. The Legio specific stratagem is for 2 strategy points, and that's called Fog of War. This lets you change your deployment after you've deployed, potentially giving you some cover or a more aggressive playstyle. Handy, but may not come up all the time. Another really handy thing with this Legion is you've got 2 items of war gear to pick from. You have the Fortis Motivators or the Cameline Shrouding. The Fortis Motivators are really good because they let you repair critical damage to your legs, meaning odds are pretty good you're going to be able to keep a Warhound running at full steam a lot easier. This would be a pretty good benefit when you factor in the missions for match play. I'm thinking of things like retrieval and vital cargo, as well as hold the line. You can reliably run your warhounds into your opponent's deployment zone, denying them hold the line. That upgrades at 20 points, and the other one's Cameline Shrouding. This makes your warhounds harder to hit, but once they get hit, they lose that benefit, and that's at a pretty steep 35 points. My takeaway here would be maybe looking at factoring in the Fortis motivators, but let's actually throw some numbers at this. So I've picked my maniple with the Lupercal maniple, and I picked my Legion, Legio Solaria, to make the most out of squadrons and warhounds. Before I start throwing points at this list, I have to decide what game level I'm actually going to build to. In this case, I'm going to go with the Skirmish, which is 700 to 1250 points. Now that I know that, the smartest thing to do is always fulfill your minimum Titan count, or minimum component. In this case, the Lupercal maniple says I have to choose at least 3 warhounds. I'll take a look at the top of the command terminals for the Titan base points, and to figure out the points for weapons, I'll look at the weapon cards in the top right hand corner and fill out the Titans like you guys can see here. This gives me a total of 660 points, which is still below the minimum of 700 and well below the maximum of 1250. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to keep building to the maniple and add another Warhound Titan. This will let me take advantage of the rules where I can extend my squadrons up to 4 Warhounds and mix and match them. Again, I'm leveraging the maniple and the Legion traits to build the list, but I'm still shy of the total I can build up to at 890. So I've got a lot of room to look at something else. At this point, I would ask myself and go back to the 3 H's I mentioned in part 1. So that was hitting, holding, and hauling. Now, I know this list because they're all warhounds and they're really agile. I have a lot of hauling capacity. I'll probably do really well at missions like retrieval and vital cargo, especially when you factor in squadrons. But I'm really lacking in the holding department because yes, warhounds have the mobility to get anywhere on the board, but they're pretty easy to be taken out by another Titan. I do have some hitting power, given that I'm getting a bonus to my coordinated strikes, and we've got some decent weapons in the mix, but to round out this list from the 3 H's, what I would want to do is think about adding some more holding power and more hitting power, just to make a take-all-comers type of approach. That being said, I've fulfilled my minimum component of the maniple with 3 warhounds. I've added an extra warhound, which is still part of the maniple to take advantage of the squadrons rule. But what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to add an auxiliary titan, in this case a reaver. So this will let me hold my back line, and it'll give me some additional hitting power, just to round out those 3 H's in a better balance. The thing to note about an auxiliary titan is the auxiliary titan does not take advantage of the maniple traits. So I won't be able to throw this into any squadrons like I will with the warhounds. That brings my total up to 1220 points. So I've got a few options and things I can think about here. I can knock my point level down and maybe hope to hit the underdog margin, which would give me an extra strategy point, or I can max it out and for another 30 points and think about adding things like those Fortis motivators or some better guns on the Titans. What I'm actually going to do here is, I don't think I need the extra strategy point, but I'm going to leave it at the 1220, because this might actually mess with my opponent's ability to build a list to the underdog margin and gain a strategy point themselves, if that makes sense. So rather than the opponent having to short their list by 150 points, they're actually going to have to short their list by 180 points to hit that underdog margin. So I'm potentially denying them, and I'm not leaving myself that short for points on the board. The next two things I want to talk about aren't a fixed part of list building, but they're definitely a big contributor and can be beneficial to your list. The first one is your Princeps Senioris. This is the commander of your Legio or Maniple. And what you would do is you have to select one Titan from your Maniple to become the Princeps Senioris. In this case, I can't use the Reaver Titan because they aren't part of the Lupercal Maniple. And I've got two choices with my commander. I can either take a personal trait out of the rule book, or I can take a Legio Solara specific personal trait found in the supplement. Bear in mind, you've got an opportunity here to pick a personal trait that assists or benefits your Maniple and Legion from game to game. You can also change your personal trait depending on the mission that you're playing for, so this isn't fixed, it's actually something you pick before deployment every game you play. The last thing I want to talk about is stratagems. Now, this isn't something that's fixed in list building, but if there is a certain stratagem that you really like, you can actually build your list around it. Keep in mind, your stratagems change from game to game. You don't have to pick the same ones every time, and each stratagem has a points cost. So, because I built this list around the skirmish game level, I'm limited to 2 strategy points, meaning I can pick 2 1-point stratagems or 1 2-point stratagem. And there you have it. That was kind of a run through of a list building process going from a Titan to the Legios. The other two I had mentioned were Legio to Titan. You could just kind of go backwards from the Legio and look at the Titans. The same method I looked at for this video. And the other one was the more advanced kind of build your own. Hopefully this gave you a better idea of how to apply all the things I talked about in part 1, and I'll catch you on the next one.